We did get a question about gophers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and as usual, I said raptors are the solution, is the way to go. Okay, how do I fix wilt fungus in my soil? Okay, so most of the pathogenic fungal infections come from overwatering. Number one, that's the most important thing, is stop watering. Stop watering. Um, that's the most important thing. And then you need more diversity of plants. So you get in nature, you get fungus blooms, or it doesn't bloom, but it fruits, especially when it's dominant. So that means there's not enough diversity. So this and it's not verticulum. It's what how do you pronounce the fungus? I'm
Yeah.
Laura wrote verticulum, and that's not exactly right. So but that one is what's called a switcher. It's good in soil. When the soil's healthy, it's there, it's perfect, it's either benign or actually good. It's one of the good fungal players. But when the soil becomes anaerobic, in other words, there's too much water, it's too saturated, or the diversity has dropped too low, so there's no biological activity, it takes over and switches and becomes pathogenic.
Interesting.
So that is the story with that. And in general, you don't need to fix fungus in soil. You need to diversify. You need to have, I would add more organic matter in the form of compost, as opposed to just in the form of mulch. I would add compost, worm castings, and more plants. So consider actually putting out a ground cover like strawberry, or depending on where you are, a carapia, or there are other ground covers that will be basically living mulch, and their roots will start adding exudates into the soil. So that's that question, and I'm sure people may have more on that. We had a great question about blueberries not working, that someone had blueberries and so forth, and they didn't fruit and they didn't do their thing. And I'm like, yeah, blueberries have to have the blueberry fungus. So they have there's a special mycorrhizal fungi for blueberries. So that means you have to go and find really healthy blueberries and take some native soil underneath those blueberries, and maybe even some of the leaf matter, and put it into around your plants. And it just a teaspoon or so. But that's true for all plants. If you can get really good like soil from either in your garden, or you have a neighbor who's got a really great garden going on, or great landscape, or even, you're in a forest or something. I mean, I don't recommend taking soil from forests, but it's only a couple teaspoons. Take that in a bag, a plastic bag, and as soon as you get back to your garden, put it down in your garden, and you are basically inoculating it with wild biology. So that's actually, it's like sourdough starter. Okay, so question here is, does that work well with pots too? And I think you were asking with regard to the overwatering, underwatering, and adding plants. Yeah, I mean, pots look really, to my eye, look really boring with one plant sticking out of them. I mean, even when you have a tree in a big pot, I always plant around that tree as densely as I possibly can, stuff hanging down over the sides. And I'm a maximalist when it comes to planting. So but yes, if you are in a situation where you really have something that is precious, that is struggling in a pot, you may consider removing it from the pot. Removing it from the pot, putting in good drainage in the bottom of the pot, um, replacing it potentially with decomposed granite or some other material for the containers. We have a whole class on containers. I recommend that you take that, and we talk a lot about edible gardening in containers in that class. All right. And then finally, let's see, there were great. And, it's kind of like the usual suspect questions with regard to removing grass. Why didn't my warm season grass go away when I sheet composted? I mean, what do you think about that? I think it's unrealistic. I think it's totally unrealistic for us to imagine that something as well adapted to a hot environment is going to it's just going to go away because, we tried to rip it out. I mean, it has so many adaptations to not
Yeah,
disappear.
so that's true. But that being said, so what we have learned this lesson over and over again, is if at all possible is for sure make sure that the soil is moist before you take it out. If you take it out dry, you're definitely not going to get it. Also, if you've got the time and it's worthwhile taking the time, is take it out, water it for a couple of weeks and see what comes up. And then you do another pass. So that helps a little bit. And then you've got a plant. The more plants there are, the healthier the soil gets, the easier it is to remove the grass that does grow back in. And yeah, but it's not waving a magic wand and it just goes away. And you're sod cutting. So if you're trying to do the lasagna method,
That's key.
yeah, if you're trying to do the lasagna method on warm season grass, that definitely doesn't work.
It
So you're looking at a
really
sod
doesn't.
cutter. Yeah.
I mean, places that get more, so you will see on the internet, lots of people in places that get more summer rain. So it's really, really hot and it's raining. So if you're in an environment like that, you can try taking out warm season grass with sheet mulching. You might actually get okay. But in places where we don't have any summer moisture and it's, so that decomposition is very difficult to really, really get going. And yeah, it's going to be almost impossible to get rid of.
Yeah.
And especially, Bermuda is one thing, but then Kikuya and some of these other ones that are just, they are, they're really adapted to surviving you.
Yes.
So,
Like
yeah,
those weeds.
yeah, yeah. I mean, basically, all these things thrive on soil that is not very microbiologically active. So the more healthy, biologically active, the more plants that are in the landscape actually, building the soil sponge, the less effective that warm season grass or any unwanted plant is. They all thrive on, weeds as an example, warm season grass, any grasses, they kind of thrive on certain conditions that are not about highly complex situations. So yeah, I recommended putting down a ground cover, making sure a living ground cover. The person who asked the question is actually solarizing. And I said, yeah, I mean, people do it and have success doing it. Just because I've never had success doing it doesn't mean you might not, you might. So that's great. But if we can keep you away from spraying glyphosate, that's really great. Glyphosate is just, it's so destructive to the soil microbiome, and it's the kind of stuff that we don't want to be exposed to anymore. We don't want it in our water. We don't want it anywhere. So yeah, a little bit more elbow grease. Well, there are no more questions that have come in.
Right.
I've put a bunch of information into the chat, and I'm just going to turn it on just in case some people want to say something in the chat, because it might be easier than in the Q&A. And actually, one other thing, the last picture of the really nice planter with the trellises, and it has strawberry on the bottom? That's passion vine, passion
Oh,
fruit vine
I
on
didn't
the
know
wall.
that.
I just noticed it in the picture. I was like, oh, look at
Very
that. That's pretty cool.
cool.
Yeah. Well, you are welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Anything else, Mary Ann? This is really fantastic. It
No,
was
no,
fun.
there's a
Great
lot of
presentation.
information. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And just remembering that that whole conversation at the very beginning of it about soil applies to everything you plant, even turf. So, yep. All
Yeah.
right.
Talk about soil in just about every class.